Fantasy football is a lot of fun, but it can also be frustrating, and some players make it especially difficult to enjoy. But who are the top 10 most annoying players to own in fantasy football? Let's start with number 10. Chris, who's the first player that frustrated you to no end last year and might do the same next year?
Well, it's got to be Kadarius Toney. Because on the one hand, with Kadarius Toney, we know what he can do. This is a guy who doesn't need a ton of touches, has tremendous upside, but he can't stay healthy. And when he's healthy, he doesn't really get on the field a lot. And when he does get on the field a lot, he doesn't really get the ball a lot. I don't understand it, because even here with the Chiefs, when it looked like he was starting to get healthy, he still wasn't playing a lot of snaps. He still wasn't involved in a lot of plays. Does he not understand the playbook? Can he not learn the playbook? Does he have a limited skill set? And then every time you feel like, finally, I can trust Kadarius Toney again. I can put him in my lineup. I can put that week winning upside in my lineup. What happens? He catches a pass and hurts his ankle, limps off the field, and he's out for the game. And he's out for 3 more weeks. And it's probably going to happen again next year, but you have to take a chance because he's so good and he has so much upside and he's tied to Patrick Mahomes, but he's probably just going to be extremely annoying once again next year.
I mean, Toney just seems like a guy who's going to be a perpetual tease, never actually live up to what should be massive potential. I really hope that description doesn't fit this next guy. So far, 2 years in, we haven't seen this huge upside of Kyle Pitts. Now, you can blame injuries for this past season, right? Missed most of the year, but we do remember, those of us especially who drafted him very early, that he had been a massive bust up until that point. Now, you can also say it's not him, it's the offense. They didn't have a quarterback. This is all true. The passing game in itself wasn't that great. Marcus Mariota, not the answer. Are we going to fall for this again? Is Kyle Pitts going to be this guy that just lures us in and we take him early? Say he's going to be a top 3 tight end. He's going to be this huge value this year. And then he does it again and lets us down. Is Atlanta's offense really going to even be better next year? I don't know. And I'm really worried. But I have to say, so far, Kyle Pitts has really been more frustrating than any tight end out there. And that's pretty hard to say at the tight end position. Next up, I think you have a very special quarterback in mind.
Yes, if you watched our content, our videos during this last season, you heard me rant a couple times about this guy, and that is Derek Carr. And now it's probably going to happen again, because what are we seeing from Derek Carr? He's either going to get traded or released here. He's certainly going to be playing somewhere new in 2023. And what is going to happen? He's going to sign with a team. People are going to get excited about him again. Oh, it's a great situation. Oh, he's got weapons. Wait, he didn't have weapons last year? He had Josh Jacobs, one of the best running backs. He had Devontae Adams, arguably one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. And he was just so frustrating, because in games where it just seemed like such great matchups where he should just absolutely go off, he did nothing. In fact, he didn't do nothing. He lost you matchups. Then he'd play these teams you're like, you can't start Derek Carr this week, and somehow he'd be good. And I bet you we're just going to get more of that next year, and people are going to fall for it again because he's going to go to some new situation, some new teammates, new weapons around him. People are going to fall for it, but you know who won't fall for it? This guy.
The worst part about Carr is that he hasn't just been consistently bad or even mediocre. It's just sometimes he puts up these huge games and looks really good, and then you have no idea what he's doing, so you don't know what to expect. But yeah, I don't expect any better next year. Now, I do expect better from Justin Herbert, but I wonder if we're going to also be frustrated again because we're expecting better. This is a guy who we really thought was going to be an elite quarterback, and I'm not talking real life, I'm not talking skills and arm strength and all this intangibles. So we're not even going to get into that debate right now. I'm talking pure fantasy value. He was not elite this year. He wasn't, and he was very frustrating because he never had any of those big games. It's like you couldn't really bench him because, of course, you didn't have a quarterback on waivers or on your bench that was better than him. But you weren't ever really glad that you started him because he didn't win you weeks. He didn't have these massive ceiling games. Austin Eckler was scoring touchdowns, right? They were conservative all year long. Now, that's going to change because the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, is gone. But I wonder if we're really going to expect more than he's going to deliver. One thing I know is that it was frustrating last year, and I hope it doesn't happen again in 2023. All right, it's time to go to the ground. Let's talk about a running back who was extremely hard to own.
Yeah, I had DeAndre Swift in so many leagues last year. I even went out and traded for him in Dynasty. Thought I pulled a fast one on Keith. And it turned out he pulled a fast one on me because DeAndre Swift was so frustrating and so annoying to have. I mean, started the season off great, and then instantly, what did we start hearing? He's getting the ball too much. We have to protect him, and then he's hurt, and then he comes back, and he's getting used too much, and he's getting like 5 touches. And what is Dan Campbell saying after the game? Well, we're kind of using DeAndre Swift too much. 5 touches is too much for DeAndre Swift. Look, I can handle Jamal Williams getting carries, vulturing goal line touchdowns, fine. But when Justin Jackson was getting more touches than DeAndre Swift, that's when it just went off the rails for me. And I don't know what's going to change next year. Is he going to be the same annoying guy next year? Because what's going to be different? Dan Campbell's still there. Jamal Williams is still going to be there. Yeah, almost like Toney, though, you have to take a chance on this guy because he has so much weekly upside, but at the same time, he is so frustrating, and I bet it happens again next year.
My running back that I got beef with, and I've said it all year, had trust issues with Jaguars running backs in general, and now I can very specifically say it's Travis Etienne that I'm worried about. I really didn't have a lot of him this past season because not even injury related. It wasn't like I was worried away he would stay on the field. I think that wasn't it. It's Doug Peterson I got issues with. He's never been a guy who's committed to one running back. Well, he did early on. It was very clear, and it was James Robinson. Okay, so Travis Etienne, let's remember, was being dropped in fantasy leagues by week, 4 or 5. People were ready to just trade him for nothing, to give up on him. And then, of course, he pulled the old switcheroo, and then James Robinson became droppable, and then Travis Etienne looked like he was going to be your savior. And then, of course, once again, we got tricked because as soon as he put up a couple of big games, then all of a sudden, the dry spell hit. Travis Etienne went 6 straight weeks without scoring a touchdown. They were giving the ball to everybody but him near the goal line, including Trevor Lawrence rushing for touchdowns. That's always fun. And he just wasn't getting the volume. They were just pass happy, and Etienne was just not helping your fantasy team. And then, of course, just when you were ready to give up on him, he had that one nice game at the very end of the season after you had been eliminated from the playoffs. So anyways, Etienne, I just don't know. Am I really going to see him as an elite fantasy running back next year? Probably not. All right, who else is just frustrating the living daylights out of you?
Mark Andrews, another guy I traded for in Dynasty, and I was doing backflips when I got Mark Andrews. I said, I can't believe it. I have a young stud tight end in his prime that I can lean on for the next 5 or 6 years. I couldn't even lean on him for the second half of my fantasy season. He was on my bench for pretty much the second half of the entire season, doing absolutely nothing for anybody's fantasy team. He was supposed to be the, kind of like, well, I didn't get Travis Kelce, but it's okay because I got Mark Andrews. No, it wasn't. He wasn't even as good as tight ends that you got off waiver wire for much of the season. And now what do we do with him next year? He's still an elite player. He's still an elite, tight end. It's going to be so tough for Mark Andrews again next year. Even if Lamar Jackson is back, are you going to feel good about him going into next season? I'm really not. I'm ready to just, have to deal with this Mark Andrews roller coaster once again at the tight end position, which is kind of why I said this year I'm going Travis Kelce or I'm just completely punting the position.
Look, there were some people I saw in drafts last year taking Andrews over Kelce. Well, hey, he was the T1 the year before. Why not do it again? And he didn't. All right, this next pick, and look, I do realize that probably people have forgotten about this, at least most people, and it's a take, and everyone has bad takes, but I know I personally will never forget the fact that I told several people in Week 17, championship week for a lot of people, for most of you who played fantasy football last year, to sit Mike Evans. That sounded like really great advice at the time. I mean, it made all the sense in the world. The numbers backed it up. The logic was there. And it sort of came back to bite me. Here's the thing. Mike Evans had that massive drought. I think it was like 10 weeks in a row without a touchdown. He wasn't getting big yardage. He wasn't even catching the ball from Tom Brady because he wasn't getting it thrown to him. And when it was, they just weren't connecting. It looked like Evans was like an afterthought in this offense. So he was frustrating just straight up all year long. And then, of course, just when I put him on my bench, true story, in a championship matchup. Of course, that's what he does. I'm not going to ever forget this. I'm probably not going to live it down for some people who did take my advice. If so, apologies. Mike Evans, I'm sorry that I drafted you in the first place. Might be sorry if you took a chance on this guy as one of your top wideouts.
Yeah, you're talking about going 10 or 11 games without a touchdown. What about the entire season without a touchdown? That was Diontae Johnson. But what was crazy about it, it's, there's lots of wide receivers who didn't score touchdowns because they don't really get the ball thrown to them. Diontae Johnson had almost 150 targets. And this is what made him so annoying this year is you look and you said, wow, Diontae Johnson had 10 targets. How can I bench a guy with 10 targets? So you put him back in your lineup going, well, if he gets 10 targets this week in this matchup, he'll do great. And he would get 10 targets and he would do great. And it would be like that every single week. And you got this tug of war going on in your mind saying like, you got to chase the targets, but also saying, but he's not catching any passes or scoring any touchdowns. And yeah, I don't know how it gets better for him. I mean, it's still Kenny Pickett. This was a very conservative offense. I'm sure there'll be a very conservative offense again next year. I'm sure he'll score more than 0 touchdowns, but I bet he's going to be extremely frustrating again next year because you're always taught chase the targets and the targets are there, but the results just weren't.
The results definitely were not there for, well, you know what? I think it's safe to say that we can go beyond just one player. Russell Wilson has got to be the most annoying player, but what about the entire Broncos offense? That's right. I think any Bronco that you had at any point this season was just flat out annoying because we kept thinking this should be a really good offense. This should be a great fit for Russell Wilson. I mean, let's see. Russell Wilson was terrible. Cortland Sutton wound up being droppable. Who did they have at running back? I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah, because Melvin Gordon got cut after Javonte Williams got hurt, and then they had Latavius Murray. If you had anybody in Denver, you hated life because you bought into it. It didn't happen. And now, are we really going to do this again with Sean Payton as head coach? How many people are ready to buy in to Russell Wilson revival? Chris, are we going to get suckered again?
I want to say no so badly. But this is why. Why did they have to get Sean Payton? Why not somebody else? This is going to be a tough decision, no doubt.
Those are some of the most frustrating players to have in fantasy last year. But who might be those players that you'll be glad you had on your team next year? Check out these players who are skyrocketing